Hey, I think it's 8:30 now, so we will begin. And if anyone drops in, they will probably understand most of what's going on anyway. So welcome everyone to this SAGA session. And for those of you who haven't joined us before, SAGA is the Swedish Annual Game Design Awards, which are for everyone, but held in Sweden. And these sessions is a way to spread knowledge about game design and to keep an open discussion about game design related topics. And we hold this kind of sessions 2 times every month. And we invite a keynote speaker who will talk about a topic of their choice. And tonight we have invited Anne-Laure Janssen to talk about accessibility in board games and how to design board games for a wider audience with accessibility in mind. And this feels like a topic that is important for everyone, no matter what your target audience is. This will probably have a lot of good knowledge for anyone who designs games. So in just a minute or so, I will let Anne-Laure do her presentation. But first of all, I will mention that we hold these sessions in collaboration with Studiefrämjandet Stockholm and the Swedish Discord server Speldesign Bubble. And let's see. Okay, if you have any questions about the presentation, you can write them in the chat, or you can raise your hand if it's an urgent question that you want to get the answer for right away. And I will keep a look on the chat to see and to tell whether it's something to be addressed right away. We will have questions and answers. We will have a Q&A bit after the presentation, and that will be about the topic. And after that, we will have a short break. After the break, there will be an open forum where we can talk further on this topic or anything else game design related. Yes, I think that was all the the pre-info that I should mention. So please, Anne-Laure, I'm very happy that you could join us. And now I will pass over to you.
Well, thank you first of all for inviting me. It was really nice, and it is really nice to everybody that has joined and that is planning on making board games more accessible. So already before we start, thank you for that. So my name is Anne-Laure Janssen. I am a Braille teacher and an assistive technology coach. So basically, I work constantly with blind and visually impaired people. And also, I am visually impaired myself. So that is why, for instance, for the questions in the chat and for the raised hands, I personally won't notice it. So that is why I needed a bit of assistance for that. I am visually impaired from birth, so I basically have no idea what it is to see properly. But that did not make any change in the fact that I love board games. I play very regularly board games, basically nearly every day. Of course, sometimes there are some board games that are problematic. There are some board games that you have to get a bit creative if you want it to be accessible. I sometimes need also the help of other players, but all in all, there is always an opportunity to play. And that is what took me to board design 2 years ago. It was actually the constatation when I was teaching Braille. I mostly teach to adults, so people that are losing or have lost their vision as in adulthood. And they told me that they felt more and more isolated because they cannot relate anymore with other people. They don't have discussion topics, common discussion topics, and things like that. And well, as a board game enthusiast, I find that board games bring all kinds of people to the table. And my goal with designing more accessible board games was just that. Bringing those people that think that they do not belong anymore, or they are a hindrance when they try to play, bringing them back to the table and showing that, well, you can have fun even if you don't see properly. It's not an obstacle. It is just something that you can manage. And obviously, if more and more people and more designers and more publishers try to take that into account, it will only benefit everybody, because also people that do not have any visual impairment will benefit from a better designed game. So that is the whole idea that I had behind starting to design games that are mostly accessible for the blind. So, screen sharing now. Let's go again. Is it that one? Is the presentation showing?
Yes.
Perfect.
It's not in presentation mode, but you could press F5 to do that.
That is interesting. I have it in presentation mode on my computer, and for some reason, wait a minute. So as you also can notice, I am working on different screens at the same time. One screen that is much bigger and much closer to my eyes. So that is the reason why I might disappear from the webcam at some point. So let's... how does that thing now work? Well, you know what? Is it still readable even in that format?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe I will just share it like that for,
okay,
well, more easy reasons. So the idea, design smarter and reach wider. Basically, designing with accessibility in mind does not necessarily mean that it will be much more expensive, or that will take much more time, or that will be much more complicated. Sometimes it is really about very little changes that can make a huge difference. And that is really what I want to focus on this time. So first of all, when you talk about blindness and visual impairment and low vision in general, you have to realize that it is a spectrum. So it's not like you are blind so you don't see anything, and you are sighted so you see everything. Legally, I am considered as legally blind because I have a white cane. That does not mean that I consider myself as blind. I still have vision remaining, and I can still use it. And well, of course, I have accessibility tools and I have assistive technologies working, but that does not mean that I can't do anything by myself. If we take some of the most common types of visual impairment and legal blindness, I have a couple of them here on the screen. So it can be, for instance, loss of field of vision. So basically tunnel vision, you see the very center, you don't see anything around. It can be just the opposite. You don't see the center, you see everything around. It can be that you see everything, but nothing is sharp. It can be that you have black spots everywhere. So you see that there is a huge gradation in what kind of troubles you can have with your eyes. Also, you have to consider that you can be blind from birth, in which case, for instance, images will never make really sense for you, or you can be blind as an adult. In that case, images and raised dots will really help. You can be blind due to an accident, so basically one day you see, the next day you can't see anymore. You can have some kind of eye condition that is degenerative, so it will slowly evolve, but you won't have the one day I see, one day I don't see. And this all put together mean that when talking about accessibility in board games, you will rarely please everybody. Because, for instance, if we take the extreme case of tunnel vision, you can have perfect vision in that little circle that you see in the center. In that case, a very small text will be perfectly readable for you. But on the other hand, if you take somebody with a normal field of vision, but nothing is sharp, well, that little text will completely disappear. In that case, you need a very big letter. But a very big letter will be too big for some tunnel vision. Also, with the same level of sight remaining, you will have different people that will have different abilities and that will be able to use it differently. So when you think about visual impairment and blindness, think always that there are plenty of different cases, and don't assume too much or too fast that, okay, that won't work in any case. In your games, when you will make adaptations, sometimes it will only work for one little group. But don't forget that one little group is one little group that would not have been able to play if you had not made that change. So even if you don't please everybody, you already please a little group. And that is already such an improvement. So think about that and don't be discouraged if you see all those pictures and you think, okay, not even considering designing for that, not working. Accessibility in board games. There are three main questions. Why should you take that into account? Who should take that into account? And when should you take that into account? First of all, let's start with why. Well, obviously, because some people need that. Some people that are visually impaired, that have low vision, but not only those people will benefit from your better design. It is estimated that nearly 20% of the board game players are over 55. That does not mean that you have a poor vision or that you are visually impaired, but you have to be realistic. At 60, your sight and your vision might not be as good as at 20. So making a board game more accessible for low vision will also benefit people that do not really qualify as low vision, but I can make with a little bit of help. Also, thinking about accessibility, it's not only about people with huge problems. It can also be with people that are struggling with little things that can be really troublesome and problematic in board games. Think about colorblindness. Think about dyslexia. You can't read text properly. You can't see color properly. Those are all the little details that will make that one game is more attractive than another. Even though both games are equally good, but, well, technically one game you can play and the other you cannot. Also, there is always some situations where even for you it will be difficult. So you can play in a place it's too dark, you can play in a place it's too bright. Yes, too bright can actually be an issue, especially when you have some boards that are very white or cards are very white. And well, if you're playing 2 hours with that kind of situation and lighting, it can be very, very tiring for the eyes. And well, let's be realistic. If you want to play during a power outage, you will be really glad if it's a bit more accessible and if you have better contrast and easier to read fonts and stuff like that. So inclusivity, it's not about only making game for accessible for visually impaired and low vision. It is about making the game better for everybody. And usually that requires only one step more. You have a good design, do that step. Think about that step. What could I change to make it even better? So, who should consider accessibility in board game? Well, obviously you as a designer. And also, obviously, it depends what you plan with your game. If you plan on pitching, there are a ton of accessibility features that you will not have to consider. Take, for instance, the font size, and things like that. But on the other hand, if you plan on self-publishing, you will take all those elements into account. Anyway, incorporating the accessibility features already during the development process will always help. Because even if you are pitching your game, if you can pitch it and put as an advantage of your game that, hey, my game can also be played by this and this and that kind of people, it's a family game, even your grandma that can't see properly will be able to play. Those are all little elements that will make your game more appealing in general. Obviously, publishers need to take that into account. After all, they are the ones that put the games on the market. Do they want accessibility in the games? Don't they? Are they aware that there are accessibility features that can be implemented quite easily and not necessarily at more cost? So as a designer, it can also be your role to just mention that and open the conversation about that. Obviously, if you are working as a graphic designer or as an illustrator, it's good to know about that, but it is also everybody else around your game. A game is not done when you get the final box into your hand. If you want that people play it, there will be marketing, there will be website, there will be ads, there will be YouTube video reviews. All of these people can, to some extent, also make accessibility better and consequently make your game have a better reputation and reach a wider audience. So don't forget about those. They are also really important people. When should you consider accessibility? Well, ideally from the start. From the very start, I have an ID. First thing first, is your ID designed for the blind and low vision with the idea of integrating sighted people? Or is it an ID that you have for sighted people and you want to incorporate low vision and visually impaired people? This is an important distinction because it's basically not the same questions that you will ask yourself. And the main thing that you will have to think about in that stage of ID is about game mechanics. Then comes the game design. Obviously, it is only the start. It is thinking about, will I have a board? Will I have tokens? How will I score? Will it be a scoring track? Will it be tokens? Are they meeples? Are they cards? Which are the moving parts? All of these elements can be made more or less accessible, depending on what your goal is, because at the end, it's your game, it's your ID. You decide where you want to go to. Then when it comes to real game development, then you really start to think even a step further about user interface. How do people interact with the game? How do people interact between themselves during your game? And then, of course, you have the game publishing. So there you have all the final packages, the final fonts, the final design, the final graphics, the illustrations, and all the marketing that I have already mentioned beforehand. So all those elements can be taken into account when you are planning on taking inclusivity and accessibility into your game. I mentioned the difference between designing for the blind and incorporating sighted people, or designing for sighted people and incorporating blind and low vision. The main difference is the basic question. If you design for blind and low vision, your main question at the very start will be what? What mechanics does work? What are the components that I can use? What are the things that blind people, either from birth, either later on in life, either with complete blindness, either with partial blindness, what can they do? What can they use? What can they feel? And on the opposite, if you design a game that is for the general public and you want to include other players in the gameplay, it is how. How can I manage to add additional players with special needs? How can I change my game design? How can I change my components? How can I change the flow of the game so that it is not a problem? There is also a third alternative, and that is actually making existing games accessible. And that is, for instance, the picture that is here at the bottom. It is a company in the US that is specialized into that currently. That is 64 ounces game. And basically what they do is you need the base game, so you need to buy the base game. And then what they will sell you, it is called accessibility kits. And it is, for instance, here it's the picture of Splendor Duel. So these are all transparent labels with Braille on them. So transparent labels for the cards, transparent labels for the tokens, and also possibly some additional board with 3D printed, all things that make an existing game accessible. So in that case, the question is completely different because you already have something that is a finished product, and it is about, okay, can a blind person play? Yes, if they know what's on the card, if they know what kind of token it is. How can I make the necessary changes? Because basically one card without Braille is exactly similar to another card without Braille. And in case of Splendor, all the tokens are the same shapes. So how do I do to change afterwards? And that is that kind of possibility. So that is also about how do I do that? Well, I guess that most of you will still be more interested into designing games for everybody and bringing people that have maybe more vision deficiency into the game. So your main question will more be how do I do that than the basic what should I do? So what can you think about when designing a game and you want to introduce accessibility features? It can be so much. I mean, first of all, of course, there is the game mechanics. Then you have the game components. You have the tokens, you have the meeples, you have the boards. Then you have all the visual elements. Yes, it's not because you design for the blind that you don't have visual elements. Remember, people that are blind can still see to some extent. And a game designed for the blind does not need to be boring. Think about that. I mean, everybody likes to play a nice game. I mean, why should you want to play a board game looking like Monopoly if you can have nice art on it just to pretend you make it accessible? That just doesn't make any sense. So it does not need to be boring to be accessible. That is really important. So regarding the elements, well, of course, you will have everything that is icons related. You will have all the colors that you will implement into your games. You will have also the contrast, because color on its own, it's not enough. You will need contrast. You will also need to think about possibly the fonts. And yes, it does not really fit into the visual elements list, but it was kind of close, so I put Braille there too. And then there is also the rule book. Don't forget, if nobody has reviewed your game yet on YouTube, if there are no how to play videos and stuff like that, the rule book will be the first contact with your game. If the rule book is not accessible, but the whole game is, well, sorry, but people will give up before that. I have had a couple of times games that I just have given up just because of the rule book. I mean, it was a nice rule book, extremely beautiful. I don't actually remember which game it was, but basically the background was kind of a brick situation. So there were all the lines from the background and all the lines from the script, and I just couldn't read anything. So if your rule book is not accessible, it's a shame, because you kind of lose all the advantages that you put in the rest of the game by thinking about everything else. So do not negligent your rule book. It is really, really important. So let's talk about game mechanics. If you are playing with low vision and blind people, obviously some mechanics, it just won't work. And other mechanics, you might think it will not work, but it might. So, example of one mechanic that will never work with blind and low vision, backdrawing. So basically backdrawing games. So I have here the illustration in the bottom left, of Quacks of Quedlinburg. It is also, you have in that same category Orléans or Altiplano. So basically, you have the same shape token that you put into your bag and that you draw randomly. Yeah, imagine putting some markings on it. I think that maybe I will win a bit more often if I am able by touch only to know what I'm drawing. So bag drawing is just something that will not work. On the other hand, when you have a mechanic that will not work, you still can play around and have fun. And that is, for instance, exactly what I did with Soccer-Touristi, which is an accessible game designed for the blind that I created. And it is just the opposite. So you have stuff in your bag, but they all are different shapes. And it is a memory and tactile game. So to make it short, at some point you will hear an object and you will have to fish it out of your bag without looking. And it kind of feels a bit silly, but when I tested that with sighted people, it was actually extremely funny because I did not realize how difficult it would be for sighted people. So it is a game that I always have in when I go to blind associations for the blind or to places with people that may be sighted but work with visually impaired, just to make they feel what it is like to rely on another sense than just sight. So it's a back drawing, but yeah, you know what you're drawing. And the top picture on the right, it is about the don't assume too much. So during Lincoln this year, so the final for the SAGA, for the Swedish Annual Board Game Design Award, there was one game that was called Snakes in Shapes. Basically, you had to look at the board from a distance. You had a snake that you had to physically put in shape, and then you had to put that snake on the board. And I was one of the persons that had to judge that game. So I can imagine the poor designer. I mean, it's kind of terrifying. You will be judged by somebody that's blind, so won't even be potentially able to see anything. And I wasn't that sure of what I would be able to achieve, but I mean, I was very, very, very enthusiastic about that game. And it turned out that I wasn't even the worst. So do not assume. It feels like it's a dexterity game that you have to look from a distance. That is something that would never work for the blind. Well, at least for me, it worked. Would that have worked for somebody else that is completely blind? Obviously not. But don't close the door too early about implementing. For instance, in that game, there are cards. Well, make the cards accessible. And even if not everybody can play, well, people with low vision that still can play and want to play won't have trouble because, oh, the cards are so complicated, I can't read them either. So I'm not playing at all. So really, it's not about assumptions. Think about it and try. Just try and see what happens. When it comes to components, you have nearly an infinity of possibilities on how to make something better and something more accessible. Obviously, some part of it will come with some price tag, but there are some designs that are actually so easy to implement and that are not particularly more expensive. So it's always worth to consider. So for instance, having different shapes for different values of coins, that is one of the most common accessibility feature that is already implemented into quite a lot of games. So the illustration in the top right is tokens from sight. And although the sizes are not that different, so basically if you have only one coin, you won't be necessarily able to decide by size only, is it the 3, is it the 5? But the coin that you are going to use the most during the game is the 1. And as you see on the picture, the 1 has a hole in the middle. So basically, the one coin that you will use the most is the most recognizable by touch only. So that little hole is making a huge difference because you can literally go blind in the stack and just drop and just pull out the money that you need. Another possibility that you can implement is having interlocking parts. So that will be the bottom right image that is azul stained glass of Sintra. So the idea with interlocking parts, there is actually two things. So one thing is that the pieces won't have a tendency to move as much if by accident you bump them. But also that simplifies everything because, well, when you see a notch and you see something that will fit into the notch, you don't need to remember, in which direction did I have to put that on my board? Where does that go? It's obvious, visually and tactilely. You see a notch, you see a V shape, you know that it just go together. So it means basically less reading in the rule book because it's obvious. It means less memory because you don't have to remember how you have to put the tires. I mean, it's obvious. And it will move much less around. So all of that makes it that although it is most probably not designed specifically with low vision in mind, it is still a very good thing to do, and it is really working. One last thing that you can also do, one of the many things that you can do, is with tokens. You have a lot of games that use round tokens. So for instance, with Flamecraft, you have the basic version that has some basic tokens for the different elements. Same thing with Wingspan, same thing with Wormspan. There are a lot of games where the resources are basically all the same, being flat little cardboard circles or being basic wooden cubes, anything that can be easily and affordably produced. And then most of the games have then the deluxe version where you will have the real shapes. So wood that actually are little logs, or in case of Flamecraft, you will have an anvil, you will have a piece of meat and things like that. Not everybody will be able to afford the upgrades, not everybody will be willing to pay for the upgrades, but there is also the 3D printing possibility. So 3D printing is something that is now becoming much more affordable, much more accessible, and also, even if you don't have your own 3D printer, it is starting to get, for instance, in libraries. Here in Finland, we have several libraries with 3D printing. You just come with your file and then you come up with something. So if you go on 3D printing websites like Thingiverse or Printables and things like that, there will always be people that will already have created the files to get those kind of 3D looking tokens. So if you have a printer, or if you have access to a printer, family member, library, whatever, you want to have something that is a bit more different than just the round tokens, because round tokens, you can't really deal with that. It is possible to have a really, really cheap version because, well, plastic does not cost a lot. So you can really have those 3D printed for very low price. It is obviously not the same quality and not the same feel as the real upgraded components, but it is an affordable version that will help you have something that is much more tactile and much less it's a circle with a drawing, I can't see the drawing, or maybe the colors are too close, color blindness, I can't distinguish them. So having the different shapes additionally to potentially the colors, it really makes the whole thing much more accessible for everybody. And even for sighted people, I mean, it's much more easier to manage, and it's, well, I find it more fun than just having the cardboard chips. You really have something in your hand and it feels much more realistic. So another component that is really in use in a lot of board games is everything that is meeple or pawn related. So the best way is, again, to have different shapes. And I was not expecting to put that into that presentation, but actually Monopoly is a good example. You have different shapes, all different shapes. The shapes are so well known and it's 3D. I mean, it's kind of all sort of minis. Obviously, that kind of production is much more expensive than basic meeple that are basically flat. It's a 2D image with some depth. But it doesn't mean that it's not working. And again, think about 3D printing and 3D opportunities. So if you want to have something different and you are a bit creative, or you can access to the websites. I mean, there are so many free options or paid versions of all kinds of token. I have mentioned Flamecraft previously. Well, Flamecraft come with the basic flat meeple of dragons. There are tons of meeples, dragon shapes, meeple that have been created by a lot of talented people just for that game. So it is also a possibility. That is not the only option. So if you want to still keep your budget in a realistic game in a realistic scale of price, and you still want to stay with the flat meeple, you can still implement different shapes or different colors. For instance, in the bottom left, you have a game of New York Zoo. So in New York Zoo, you have different types of animals, and all animals have different shapes and also different colors. So for instance, on the board, you can see the white, it is the Arctic fox. Then you have a pink flamingo, you have an orange kangaroo. So the shape is different, the color is different. So it makes it really easy to pick the correct form, the correct animal, the correct species when you need one. And in case you have a game that just need basic meeples and you need, well, for instance, 4 or 5 different colors, also think about the possibility to add stickers on some of the meeples. So for instance, take somebody that is colorblind and in a very severe way, so basically nearly every single color with kind of mixed together. Well, if even handcraft stuff, you take some Sharpie, or you take some sticker, and you make yourself one meeple stand out of the lot. So that person will always know, okay, that is my meeple, without having to ask or to squint about, okay, was that mine or not? Because when we are talking, for instance, about color blindness, most of the time it can be that if you put 2 colors together, you can see that it's different. But if you see only one, it's difficult to guess which color it actually is. So those are all little details that can make your game really much more fun to play, because you don't have to concentrate that much about where is my meeple, which was my meeple, and things like that. One last thing I want to mention about components is the board. Obviously, a lot of board games have boards, and in my opinion, dual layer is probably one of the best inventions in board game in recent years. First of all, it's not moving around anymore. So I don't bump my meeple or token or whatever everywhere. And also it makes things much easier because you actually feel the gaps, so you know where to place everything. Again, it is one board from sight, and you can see that they really took it to the next level. So not only do you have a dual layer board with the grooves to put your different components, but the different components also have different shapes. So there is no hesitation. You have a round component that goes in the round spot. You have a square that goes in the square spot. You have a rectangle that goes into the rectangle spot. Once again, much less reading from the rule book because it's obvious, and much less wondering where did that come from, because it moved and you can't remember. So all of these little things are really, really, really important. Obviously, the negative point of dual layers is that it is expensive. So if you are with a game of that caliber, so you are in the medium heavy games, you can afford that, because obviously people will be ready to pay much more for those kind of games. If you have some kind of party game or lighter game, maybe you don't want to put that much price on top of it. And maybe people will not want to pay much more because it is kind of a light, fun game. But again, there is the 3D option. So for instance, in the bottom left, I have a board of Azul. And if you notice on the top of the board, there is some red overlay that was 3D printed. So it is just on the top, the place where you are actually tallying your score, and probably the piece on your personal board game that is dislodged the easiest. So by making a board that can be clipped, then by making that plastic overlay that can be clipped on top of your existing board, you are actually solving that problem. First of all, your little black square won't move around anymore. And then for people with low vision like myself, I will just count how many holes there are. And it's not more about my mom that has to do it because I can't see properly when I need to go. So again, it serves people with low vision, but it also helps people with normal vision. As a designer, if you consider that your game would beneficiate from a dual layer board, but you are not ready to put that into the price tag, consider that 3D printing is an option, and act accordingly. Think about this board, about Azul. All the scoring happens on the top part. So it's easy, you print the top. I don't have the picture here, but I can compare, for instance, with another game where you have your scoring track on your personal board, and that is Founders of Teotihuacan. The only problem is that the scoring track is around the board. So on top, left side, bottom, right side. Meaning that if I want to 3D print an overlay for that, I'm not able to do that because that board is slightly bigger than my printer. And that is a problem because with Azul, for instance, I had to put it diagonally to print it, but I was able to print it. If it had been something that went completely around the board, I would not have been able to do that. So when you design something that have moving parts on player boards or on the general boards, and you think dual layer would be nice, but too expensive for me, think about the fact that at some point it is certain that some people will think about 3D printing, will model something like that because it's so easy to model. So make their life easier. They will make it, your game will be played more, and your game will really benefit from that little work that either you did or a friend of yours did or anybody in the community did. If you go on Board Game Geek, I mean, there are plenty of files about 3D printed parts that make gameplay easier. Because here with Azul, I mean, it is really easier when you don't have that little black dot that is moving all over the place. And then the last example here on the picture, it is about Meadow, and it is a bit a similar situation that we had previously with Azul's Stained Glass of Sintra. So basically in the game you have some tokens that have some shape, some rectangular shape. On one side it is a complete rectangle, and on the other side it is kind of pointy. And as you can see here on the picture, on the board, there are some notches, some V notches directly on the playing board. And there is actually another place on the board where those notches are square. Basically, what happens is that the tokens that you have into your hand, you can play them two ways. Either you use the V notch or you use the square notch. And again, because it is so obvious with the board, you are not thinking about, oh, was it on that board or on the other? It's obvious, it's visual, it's tactile, it's everything. So in your rule book, much less explanation. In your memory, much less to remember. Again, that is all making the game flow and the joy and the ease with you will bring the game to the table much easier. Because if you basically remember everything by just looking at it, you will be more tempted to play. Compared to a game that when you open the box, it will be like, okay, let me read the rulebook again because that does not make any sense. I don't remember where everything goes. So all those little things, although they are technically tactile accessibility features, are also a great way to improve everybody's feeling about the game, general feeling about the game. So let's now start with visual elements. And for some of you that went to Lincoln, those pictures might look familiar. So these are pictures from my game Camus that was in competition there. That is only the visual part, so you have to imagine that there are plenty of tactile information on them, but that is strictly the visual part that I want to talk about. And basically in the game there are 9 different cards that belongs to 3 different groups, and being able to at first glance or at first touch different the 3 groups is really important. So I wanted to have that information available in as many formats as possible. So first of all, when you look at it, obviously there is a color choice. You have the predators that are with the greenish black background, you have the prey with the pinkish, and then you have the plants with the dark blue. Then there was also the tactile shape. So on top of every card, you will see either a continuous line, a 3-dash line, or a 5-dash line. You have to realize that in the physical version, those lines are actually tactile and made with raised dots. So if you don't have the color, you just follow the line, you have the information. But there was also a third way to know which category it was. And it was actually the size of the animals or plants. So for the predators, it was in the 2x4 square, in the 2x4 rectangle. For the prey, it was in the 2x2, and then for the plants in the 2x1. So even if you did not, for instance, the 3-dash and the 5-dash could technically be a bit difficult to really count with your fingers about how many dashes are there. But only the size, the general size, is it a square or is it a rectangle? That was the kind of information that you could also help you decide, does it belong to the predator, to the prey, or to the plants? And then I was really happy with my design. I had tested several times with sighted people, with visually impaired people, with totally blind people, and globally I was really satisfied. And just before printing the final cards, I decided to make a final check, and that was checking the guidelines of the images. So basically, if I have to consider the design in lines only, which are the directions of the lines? And at that point, I noticed what you can see on the right, that the hare and the ptarmigan had basically nearly the same direction line. So if I had to simplify the design to one line, the line was in the same direction. Yes, obviously the hare has some ears that are sticking out. The ptarmigan is much more roundish shaped, but still, comparison-wise, it's easy, but with only one design, that could be a difficulty. And it was so easy to solve. Just flip one around. You have 2 different lines, you have 2 different directions, and there is no more hesitation. Okay, that's the hare, it goes that way. That's the ptarmigan, it goes the other way. So sometimes what can make your icon much more accessible, it is just a very, very small thing. Just flipping around and the problem was solved. So now if you wonder, yeah, but I did not notice that. How could I notice that? Well, take a distance from your screen, squint your eyes, and tell me where is the best difference. Is it in the top figures or in the bottom figures? Sometimes just something as small as that. Take a distance and squint your eyes. And you are kind of simulating some kind of visual impairment. And if you are thinking about, yeah, they look kind of the same, that means that somebody that is actually visually impaired will see the same. So if you at some point consider that it looks kind of the same, think about it. Is there a way to make it more different? And it does not need to be redesigning the whole thing. Look here, it's only flipping. So really small changes can make huge differences. So also talking about visual elements, colors are a major part of the board game. Maybe in the mechanics, in any case in the artwork. So how do you put that into consideration? First of all, again, think about what you hear and think about does it make sense? When you hear, for instance, don't use green and red because colorblind people can't use them, yeah, generally it is true, but think also that a color has different characteristics. You have the hue, you have the chroma, and you have the value. If you take a very dark green and a very light red, or a very light red and a very light, let's say neon green and nearly burgundy, well, even somebody that is colorblind will see it, not because they will be able to tell one is green and the other is red, but because they will be able to tell one is light and one is dark. So sometimes you can still use the colors that you plan to use. It is just about adapting. And it can just be making them light and darker. And as much as possible, avoid in your game to have all information rely on color only. You can try your best to please everyone and to make it accessible as much as possible, even for colorblind people. At some point, there will still be issues. So the pictures in the picture in the top right is about is the game from the games to mandala stones from Board and Dice. So basically, in the game, you have 4 different colors that are all visible on the picture. So you have yellow, blue, pinkish red, and purple. And then on them, you have 2 different types of images. So you have the roundish image with some design, and then at the far left, you have also some flower shape. So when you compare, for instance, with Azul, Azul has some specific design on some specific color. Here, color and design are completely separated. You will have yellow with both the designs, you will have blue with both design, and things like that. So what I did is I took that picture and I put it on internet in a color blindness simulator. And I was absolutely astonished by the amount of different versions I could get. I mean, I knew that just as blindness, color blindness is also a spectrum. There are plenty of different situations where you will see something, not see something. So these are 4 of the many, many, many options that were accessible on the website. So what you can see is, yes, something that I forgot to mention. When designing mandala stones, the creators and the publishers took color blindness into account. So it's not random. They already made the choice to have those colors because they noticed that those colors were the best working for at least a majority, or at least they were hoping a majority of colorblind people. They have playtested several times with colorblind people, with different colorblind people. So they really did their job and they really did their research. And obviously it shows. I mean, if you look at the first picture, it is still easily distinguishable which is what. If you look at the second picture, it is still possible, but honestly, between blue and red, if you only have one of the two, it can be a bit difficult to guess, is it now the red one or is it the blue one? If you look at the third picture, it's kind of okay. Fourth picture, again, it's about, well, the red and the purple. If you see them close together, obviously you see that there is a difference. But on the other hand, if you only see one, you probably won't be able to say, is it now a red one or is it now a purple one? That was about the color. But contrast is also very important. I don't know if it's important for you, but for me, for instance, if I look at those, I can see the pattern on the blue, on the purple, and on the red. I can't see the pattern on the yellow at all. So basically, when I'm playing that with my mom, I constantly have to ask her which pattern is that on the yellow. And that also shows in the grayscale. And actually, grayscale is a useful tool that you can implement in your design. If you want to check if you have enough contrast, put it in grayscale. If everything disappears, obviously there isn't enough contrast. If you can still see it, then it is okay. That is the very, very basic, easy implementation to look if it works or not. If you go online, you have some much more advanced tools that will tell you precisely what kind of shade of blue you should output if you have that kind of orange and things like that. I have the references here. That is the web aim. Regarding the color blindness tests and also the blindness images that I had at the very beginning, basically there are tons of simulators like that. They are also on computers, but they are also directly in App Store, on Android Store, and things like that. So, well, just download an app, and when you have your prototype, just put your app in front of you with your phone and just try out different situations, and that will give you an idea. Also, bear in mind that for you, it will be probably the first or maybe the second or the third time that you are in that situation. You are actually dealing with people that will have had that issue for much longer. So they are more used to the problem, and there are some things that you, as a sighted person, will think, okay, that's impossible. But on the other hand, somebody with a lifetime of experience with that handicap will say, well, no, it's not impossible. I can perfectly make sense of that. So also bear that into mind. If you are trying to play with simulations, for you, it's the first time, you are not used to it. Most people that are suffering from those conditions, they are used to it. Does not solve everything, but do not throw away some idea of accessibility just because you tested it and it did not work. It will give you an indication about, is it optimal? Probably not, but it is always nice to have actually someone with the issue, being colorblindness, being low vision, whatever, having them tested, because they will have another perspective than what you actually have. So, also important in the visual elements are the fonts. I am on several board game designers groups on Facebook, and one of the recurring questions is, what is the minimal font size I can have in my rulebook and it is still readable? Well, to give you any examples, all the text that is aligned to the right is the same font size. And obviously, you can see that there is a huge difference. So font size is not everything. And you can also see that big is not always more readable. It really depends. So when you are choosing your font, well, you can go overboard. I mean, it can be a fun font. That is not a problem. But it really depends what kind of information you will have. If it's a fun font for your title, for your big titles and things like that, it's perfectly okay if it's a bit difficult to read. But on the other hand, if you are on your board, on your cards, on your tokens, having to deal with, for instance, the point value, well, that is going to be much more problematic if everybody is looking at the numbers and wondering, is that a 1 or is that a 7? Is that an 8 or is that a 0? Is that a 9 or is that a 6? So think about what kind of font you can use for what kind of usage. Most of the time you will have one font that is kind of tame, and then one font or maybe two that are much more crazy looking and that are also part of the signature of your game. So in no case, only take boring fonts. I mean, it's also fun for low vision people to see kind of eccentric fonts, but think about where you put them. And what happens if you see a font that you really like, but yeah, you realize that that is just not working? There are still options to create it, to make it more accessible. And those are, for instance, the two lines in the bottom. So the first part of the first line is the original font. And I don't know, you can probably read it. Personally, I don't even see that there is text in that part. It is so thin, I just can't see it. One option, if you like the font, you like the shape, there are plenty of programs. Basically, every single design program, is it Scribus, InDesign, Affinity Suite, Inkscape, nearly everything, you will have the opportunity to add some thickness to the line. And that is what I did. So on the right-hand side, it is exactly the same font. It is just thicker. That is one of the issues you can have with fonts. It's too thin. One other issue you can have with fonts, it's too close. If you have text that is really close together, it can get really difficult to read, but making it bigger won't solve anything. Basically, if it's a mess when it's small, it will still be a mess when it's bigger. Again, in the kind of programs that I just mentioned, you will also have the opportunity to change the character spacing. And by changing that, you can make it much more readable. So I have here, for instance, on the left-hand side, the second line, some text that is in the original font. Again, this time I see that there is something, but I can't even see that it's text. It is so close together that I have no idea if it's a text or if it's a drawing. I just changed the spacing between the characters, and at once it becomes much clearer. And then there is the final line. The final line I wanted to show you about contrast. So I picked a background that is neither light nor dark. So basically, and if you look at the white text on that background, it does not really stand out. If you look at the black text on that background, it doesn't really stand out either. But think about possible combination. Is it by having a different color outline, or is it by having some form of shading? But for instance, at least in my personal situation, I can't read anything from the start of the line, but I can see at the end of the line that there is something. Still can't read it, but I can see that there is something. And that final part is actually just some shading behind the white that really pushes the white forward, and that's really differentiated from the background. So ideally, obviously, do not choose a background that is neither light nor dark. You are making your life complicated. But at some point, you don't have really a choice. I mean, it depends on the illustrations. For instance, if you have card illustrations and you have to put text on it, at some point you will end up with that situation that, yeah, I just can't make it work with basic white and basic black. So try to make something that will make it work. And then I forgot to mention something that I had here. Yes, I mentioned some special fonts from dyslexia. And that is, for instance, on the right-hand side, the second font. So the one with the 0 that has a stripe through it. And then also, if you look at the 8, the circle on the top of the 8 is much smaller than the circle on the bottom. So this is a font that is freely available on the internet. You just type free dyslexic font. And even if you don't use it per se in your game, have a look at it and analyze the characters and the letters and think about it. What makes that much more readable than something else? And for instance, if you look at the very end of all of those texts that are aligned to the right, so it is basically a small e, then a capital E, and then an L. And there are some fonts where it's just 3 times a line. And then you have some fonts where there is some difference. So again, when you choose your font, think about what you plan on writing. And when you have chosen your font, think wisely about the use of capital letters or not capital letters, knowing that for some letters, there will be some confusion between, is it now a small a capital E, or is it a small L, and things like that. Especially if you are experimenting with names and, well, kind of fantasy theme, and you have some special names, some special abilities, and some stuff like that. If it's not common language, people still need to know what they are reading. So really, when you choose your font, think about capital or small, and before you choose your font, type the text that you plan on using and have a look objectively. Does that work? Is there a possibility to read it wrong by accident? So these are all really small things that you can do, but that really will make a huge difference. And then we come to Braille. If you're planning on using Braille in your game, congratulations. I really appreciate that, but I have to warn you, you're in for a ride. So first of all, Braille has a legal size. So if it does not fit, you can't make that font smaller. You will have to change your text. One example on the bottom right, those are cards from the game that I designed Sokkoturisti that was mentioned previously. And the long stripes are the names for the Finnish version of the game, and the more rectangle cards are the English version of the game. So think about it, only changing the language will already highly influence the amount of Braille you will have because, well, for instance, Finnish has incredibly long words, which are obviously an issue in Braille. Also, not everybody can read Braille, especially if you get blind during adulthood. You will be much more tempted by learning to use a speech synthesis than using Braille. Braille is not easy to learn and require a really good sense of touch, and that is a lot of training. So now with assistive technologies, you have more and more access to audiobooks, computer programs that can actually read everything on your screen. You can also have now some electronic devices that are actually connected with AI. So basically, you just point the device at some page or something, and the artificial intelligence will extract the text and potentially also translate the text if needed. So all those technologies are evolving, meaning that you have more and more people that, although they are blind, they can't read Braille. So one other issue with Braille is that it could have been easy and making the same code for everybody, but yeah, did not work out like that. So although the alphabet is the same, so from A to Z, it's the same for every language, everything else has kind of their own variations. You will have the point of, for instance, a point in Finnish will be an exclamation mark in French and things like that. And also, for instance, for numbers, I have here written the number 12, followed by a Braille version of number 12, followed by a second Braille version of number 12, followed by a third version of number 12. So if you are planning on embossing, know that it will be highly dependent on language. And it's expensive. I mean, let's be realistic. All I talked beforehand were just making a different choice of color, making a different choice of shape. That's not that expensive. Braille will be expensive. So either you consider to make Braille directly available into your game. So that is, for instance, the Uno cards that I have in the picture. Also, remember, Braille is embossed. So basically, on the other side of the component, you will see. I doubt that anybody will try to look the holes that are in the cards on the opposite player, but well, technically, if somebody wants to read it by sight, it is not impossible. So if you want to really implement Braille, think about the option like a 64 ounces game did, so having more of an accessibility kit. So think that you will paste onto the card, so it's transparent. You emboss the transparent sticker and then you put the sticker on it, because that will be actually useful for the people that need it, instead of having some high production value, a high production of Braille, where basically 95 to 99% of the players won't even notice that it's there or won't just understand the need of it. And also, that is a comment that really had me laughing at Lincoln in the competition. One person, because I have Braille on my cards, so one person noticed that it will be difficult to sleeve. Basically, sleeving a game with Braille is kind of counterintuitive for me, but yeah, it seems that for some people, sleeving is really important. So you never know. So would I find Braille a good idea? Yes. Would I do it on my old game? Probably not. And I am a Braille teacher. So think about that. And anyway, it's not a magic fix. I mean, it won't bring that much people around the table, and it won't solve every problem at all. So It's a good idea, but it's not the first idea that you should do. And then, of course,
Anne-Laure,
yeah.
I just wanted to mention that I think we need to conclude this in about 10 to 15 minutes. Is that okay with you?
I'm nearly done.
Yeah, okay, good.
But thanks for mentioning.
Yeah.
So if you put everything together, always try to have different information available in different types. So for instance, here on the right, you have the basic game of Deep Sea Adventure. As you notice, you have different shapes that are sorted. You have first the triangles, then the squares, the pentagon, the hexagon. They go from light blue, middle blue, dark blue, and then not visible on the photo, but actually the triangle has 1 dot, the next one has 2 dots, the pentagon has 3 dots, and the final one has 4 dots. So by having the same information available in different formats, you make sure that at least some of it will be accessible at some point for somebody. If you can't see the color, you will see the shape. If you can't see the dots, you will still see the color. So all of these little things. One important thing is also when you have some kind of tokens, like here on the left-hand side, so the tokens from Jaipur, do both sides need to be identical? So, for instance, in Jaipur, it is a game that if you put a certain amount of cards of a certain color, then you can collect the tokens from that color. And on the tokens, if you can see properly, on the red and the blue tokens, there are some little numbers. And at the end of the game, what happens is that you tally all those numbers, but it's kind of small. But the good news is that on the other side, they have the same number in much bigger font. So basically, at the end of the game, you just turn your tokens around and it's okay. So, rulebook. I won't talk a lot about it. I mean, it's only logic. Think about logical construction. Think about what kind of background you have. Just look at what you are doing. For instance, I have 2 images of rulebooks that I think are a bit problematic. So on the bottom one, you have an extract of the Stone Age, the herd. I mean, first image, red, perfect. Second image, blue, perfect. Third image, yellow, really, I mean, it's a yellow background. There was a green meeple in Stone Age. Why not put the green on that? And on the right-hand side, I mean, that font is really killing me. And then if you look at the colors, I can't be the only one that finds it difficult to read. If it's only a small text, it's kind of okay. But otherwise, if I have to read several pages of that, it's just impossible. Also, thinking about digital rulebooks, now more and more you have your rulebook on the internet in PDF form. It's a good idea to use accessibility features. Basically, if you are using Office, if you are using Adobe, you will always have the possibility to click on check for accessibility. Just do it. It will make things much more easier. I have, for instance, rulebooks that were not accessible, meaning they were actually PDFs in image form. My speech synthesis can't read that. I will just hear image, and that's all. Other possibility that was also really, really confusing, the text was not read in the correct order. It was a setup, and the speech synthesis was looking me first point, then 10th point, then 5th point, then 3rd point. It made no sense, but it was actually the order in which the text was created. It was moved around afterwards, but the accessibility check was not done, so it was not yet in the correct order for speech synthesis. So it's a small thing, but think about it. So should everything in your game be accessible? Yeah, if possible, but don't forget that as a visually impaired, we have also tools. We have assistive technologies. We also have some recurrent material that we use. Dice trays, tactile dice, bigger meeples, 3D printed stuff. So plenty of things are actually already accessible by us because we know what works for us. So, well, Braille sticker and raised bumps and raised dots and things like that. These are all things that we have. So if you do not want to implement that into your game, you can still mention somewhere on your website, hey, if you want some accessibility, some easier, well, just put some tactile sticker or tactile paint on this and that tile, and that would help the gameplay. So that is a small thing that you can do, won't cost you anything, but will help people understand where to put what kind of marking to make your game really playable. And then everything around your game. So we talked already, there is the marketing, there is the YouTube, the how-to videos and stuff like that. Accessibility is for everyone. Think about any how-to video that starts with for the setup, you put that there. Well, obviously someone that can't see properly on the screen, that would be a mystery. But if you, as a sighted person, were at that precise moment looking at your own playing game and playing board, you miss that too. It is so easy to mention, put your meeple in the top left, right, in the top left corner or something like that. So choose your words wisely when you are presenting something in audio. And also, if you are making the website, think about the alt text on all your images. It will help because speech synthesis will be disallowed. And also, basically, think about SEO. I mean, you will end up in a better place in search engines because that text will also be read by search engines robots. And then if you want to interact and you are playing with a visual impaired or low vision player, just ask, do you need help? What can I do? What should I do? Do you prefer certain color? What's the better contrast? Where do you want to sit? Because sometimes people want to sit in a bright place, sometimes in a dark place. So that is more, again, logic. It's not about knowledge, it's about common sense. Avoid, of course, having any drinks and stuff like that laying around on the table, or be prepared to have some wiping to do. And do not hesitate to ask and to mention things aloud. And most important, if a visually impaired asks you, where is my meeple? That is exactly what they want to know, where it is. They don't need to know what's the best strategy behind that. I mean, they just want to ask where it is and know where it is. Personally, I find that slightly annoying when I ask that question and then the person that replies will, yeah, and then your best move will be to do this or that. I mean, my brain is working, my eyes are not. So let me do the game part and just think about what I asked, which is, where is my meeple? So as a conclusion, there are plenty of things that you can do, and that will be at close to no cost. What you have to realize is that taking accessibility into consideration will make the game just better for everyone. And, well, at some point you will notice that it just won't work. And it's okay. It's not a problem. I mean, you already made the necessary steps to come to that conclusion. Probably in the process, you still made some things that are better for some people. Let's be realistic. It won't ever be okay for everyone. So it's okay if it's only a little part that is taking advantage of that. It's important. And also, you don't have to compromise on every single thing. I have mentioned sites several times during the presentation about the tokens, about the boards, about the different materials. And then there is this. That is the picture of a part of a portion of the board. I mean, it's a horrible contrast. Personally, I can't see a thing. But hey, it's a game that's happening in a theme that is placed post-war, kind of steampunk feel. Obviously, it will be in those shades and in that kind of feel. That is simply part of the game. So I have absolutely no problem as a visually impaired if I have some troubles with some components, just because it is in the game. It is the feel of the game. I mean, you can't just put rainbow colors and colors like Flamecraft on the game like that. So you make some compromises, but at some point, if you think that, no, that is just not working, I am not doing that, it is still okay. You can take that decision. Anyway, whatever you do, thank you for doing it, and thank you for thinking about it. And sorry, my presentation was longer than what I thought.
That was no problem. I think everyone really learned a lot during your presentation, and well, thank you very much for the presentation and for agreeing to talk to us about this. So I want to ask the participants if there is any questions right away. If so, please raise your hand or write in the chat. And yes, Mo?
Hi, you were amazing. Wow, thank you so much. I could just listen to you talk all day. Your voice is beautiful. Do you know if there will be any webinar about mobility? I have a lot of friends, especially a lot of female friends. There's more research going into it. And we, myself included, we're all getting these autoimmune problems like fibromyalgia and Sjögren's and multiple sclerosis that are affecting our movement.
Yes.
And it hit me early this year when I was supposed to be at Spielwarenmesse, and I was very sad. But even more, it's making me think about how much physical movement is involved in games and watching how many steps it is just to set up and how difficult it is for people to manipulate objects. So will there be some webinar about that?
I would love to. Actually, I also have some friends that have just that kind of problem. And as it is degenerative, they also know that the problem will only worsen. Unfortunately, I have not yet found anybody that specializes into board gaming in that aspect. But I really think that with the increased interest into inclusivity and accessibility, well, I was now talking about visual accessibility, but obviously, as you mentioned, there is the motion accessibility that is also really important. So I'm really hoping that at some point somebody will specialize and will start to talk about that, because it is a really, really important thing.
Okay, it's something that I'm always thinking about now in terms of designing. And also my day job is English instructor for second, third language learners. So I like to have a lot of language independence to increase accessibility as well. That's all. Thank you.
That's a really great topic for another session, I think. I will look around for people who are specialized in that kind of design questions, so to speak. And if anyone who listens now or listens in the future has a suggestion on such a person, you can please reach out. That would be a really interesting talk, I think. Are there any more questions? Yes, Rege?
Well, it's not so much a question as a comment. Just very early on, you said that it benefits everybody. And as a 47-year-old person, just today I played this game where there are like tiny letters that are like, who is supposed to be able to read this? Even with my reading glasses on, just like I was struggling. So yes, very much so. It does help a lot of us.
Yes, and it's really what makes a game fun. It's a shame when you just look at the game and you think, yeah, not today. I have already a whole day behind the screen. My eyes are tired, and well, just because you know that you won't be able to read, you won't play it.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's sad if it's only that small little thing that makes the game less on the table. Anything else?
Yeah, I also wanted to mention, I think you addressed it a few times, that some designers always want to please everyone, and you can really get stuck in wanting to please all types of color blindness or vision deficiency. And I think it's good to hear from you that you can't really please everyone. It's sad that you can't, of course, but I think having at least pleased one group, I think you
It's
mentioned in the
already
beginning,
huge.
it's already a good thing. And
It
I
is.
think a lot of designers really need to hear that. And yeah. So Mo wrote in the chat, "May I share an image for caller ID?" I
Yes.
think that's okay. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just one moment. Where did I put it? Oh no.
And also waiting for that image, one thing that you have to realize is that most of the time, all those thinking you do about accessibility, it will go completely unnoticed. But there are few people that will really notice it, because those are the features that will make the game possible for them to play. So if it looks effortless, probably it needed tons of effort. So if nobody praises your game because how accessible it is, it's not an issue. Think about it like it is still working better for some people. People with much more notice, well, just like we mentioned before, font is too small. You notice that. But you don't notice as easily the font is good. So don't worry if people do not notice it. There will still be people that notice it, and everybody will still enjoy it. Ah, yes,
That's a
that
good
picture
thing.
is indeed familiar. So basically using different colors, and all colors are linked to shapes. So if you don't see the color, you still can differentiate with the shapes. Yes, that picture is, that looks familiar.
Yes, ma'am. I designed it, I think, back in late 2016 for a game that is based on colors. And I wanted a way for people to be able to see it in all light conditions. And then I started getting bigger brain and thinking about color blindness and things. And I did an experiment where I carved them in clay as well.
Ah, yes. Yeah. I think I saw that in Board Game Design Lab group on Facebook.
Yes.
Yeah, and it really grabbed my attention, because once again, it is a really easy way to solve a problem that is affecting a lot of people without having an incredible amount of money to put in, like, for instance, with Braille.
Thank you.
That's very smart.
It's kind of open source right now, so if anyone wants to use it, I can send files.
I'm interested already.
That looks useful, and looks like you put a lot of thought into that. I like it. Let's see. Do we have any more questions from the audience, or any other comments about the topic? Okay. I can also just mention that I don't have any vision deficiencies, but I still use the screen reader that's included in
Yes.
Google Chrome when reading rule books, and I am super annoyed when the accessibility checks haven't been done and they are jumping between paragraphs, and yeah, that bugs the hell out of me. And I can, of course, I can just pick up the phone and read the the thing, but yeah, it must be super annoying for anyone who has to use a screen reader for it. I'm just lazy. I'm just listening to rule books when I walk the dog and stuff like that. But yeah.
Well, which is an excellent idea. I mean, a lot of technology that is actually in use for everybody started with being assistive technology, being for visually impaired or other. If you think about your GPS, that's literally talking to you and telling you what to do. I mean, at the start, it was again something that was developed specially for the blind, and then, well, okay, we can use it for everybody. And yeah, hearing that you use the voice synthesis, it's really nice, because if more sighted people use it, more designers will probably notice about that make my thing accessible button that is everywhere, and that is so good to use. And I mean, it does not take that much of an effort to click on it, so yeah, just do it.
Yeah, it probably saves time for everyone at the end.
Yes.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, I think we will take a short break of 10 minutes, and after the break, we will have at least 20 minutes of an open forum where we can discuss this topic further if we want to, or any other game design related topic. So I will also just show this that I have not shown Ricky yet, but I think she's okay with this short view. On our next session, that's on the 5th of August, we will have a special about Festival, which is Denmark's largest board game convention. And Ricky will talk about, well, the convention itself, and with a focus on best practices when pitching your game for that competition. Okay. So a break now, and we'll see each other in about 10 minutes. Thank you, and thank you again, Anne-Laure, for
Thank you
doing
for
the
having
presentation.
me. And if there are no more questions for me, I will leave you now, because, well, I'm in Finland, so it's already 11. I need to work really early tomorrow, so I think I will go to sleep. So I will still be around about 5 minutes if some questions pop up in between. Otherwise, don't hesitate to also contact me via Messenger. You can find me. I am in the SAGA group, so don't hesitate to be in touch if something pops up.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, I'll see you all in a bit.